You are Locked On the NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
It is Locked On Jazz for the 28th of July. The new money world, the Jazz rebuilt front office, and what's to come for Hood, Favors, and Exum as they head into free agency seasons. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow. How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Great to have you aboard. Running 2-3 times a week here for a little while, and then we'll kick it up into September and October. The biggest thing I've got for you today is trying to analyze what the market is, where things stand, and what the Jazz, what the Jazz free agents and the Jazz have to embark upon with both the future, Hood, Favors, and Exum specifically. So that's the plan on today's show. It's brought to you by my good friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, who I'm not sure they're good friends of mine anymore. I keep making mistakes and losing keys and doing flat tires and doing stupid stuff, and we'll see whether they still like me or not. But I'm driving the Tucson right now. What an incredible deal. And right now you can get $6,000 off the 2017 Tucson SE Plus all-wheel drive. So it's an all-wheel drive car. These things are listed regularly below $30,000. Some even less than that, depending. And now you get $6,000 off. Plus, you always get the $100,000 Hyundai guarantee warranty. But they're Murdoch for the rest of July, which doesn't have a lot of days left, is upping it even more to $250,000. Here's what I would tell you. I'm never one who wants to tell you how to spend your money, but what I would tell you is that when you're looking for a car, right? Murdoch's got some deals specifically, the 1.99% financing with Golden West Credit Union and what I mentioned, the 250,000 mile warranty. I mean, those are pretty special. But moreover than kind of that is when you're looking for a car, include Hyundai on the list. Take a look at Hyundai and see what they have to offer, because I think you'll be really surprised at how they drive and what you can get for the price. The Santa Fe really blew my doors off on what it is capable of, how solid a car it is, what a ride, how comfortable you feel in it, and for the price. So check it out at 4646 South State Street in Murray, Utah. It's 4646 South State Street, and Blake over at Murdoch has done a great job. And if you get a chance, do me a favor. Go in and say nice things about me, because I'm not sure he's very pleased with me right now. Does that sound good? Please do that. All right, let's get to the show. By the way, we are the Locked On Podcast Network and Locked On Jazz specifically are lining up our inventory and our advertising for September and October right now. Our old clients get first dibs. But if you're interested in advertising on Locked On Jazz and being a part of this podcast and its growing audience, last month was we've had just some huge numbers last week. Please email me, dlock09@gmail.com. It's priced all based on listenership. Podcast listeners are 65% more likely to react to a client than other forms of media. And there's limited inventory, so we'd love to get you aboard and have you be a part of the program and help out your company. dlock09@gmail.com. All right, so let's go first with what the Jazz did kind of with the front office. Justin Zanuck, who left the Jazz to be a assistant general manager with a guarantee, basically being the general manager in Milwaukee, and that's why the Jazz let him go. And then the dysfunction of the Milwaukee organization came back to bite him a little bit, and he didn't end up getting the GM job. So he has had a bunch of offers and decided he wanted to come back to Utah to be back with this organization. So you have that experience. David Morway has been signed on. Morway was a consultant, kind of almost in the role of Kevin O'Connor for the last year or two. What's interesting about Morway and Zanuck, both former player agents, So both have that relationship. Secondarily, both have been in front offices now with other teams. Both were actually in Milwaukee. David was the basic general manager with Larry Bird in Indiana for a long time. And prior to that, actually represented David Benoit. So, I mean, he's been around for a long time. And what's interesting about David is he basically was going to get out of the business unless he could work for Utah. Unless he could work for Dennis. I mean, that's the level where Dennis has this respect around the league, and people want to be a part of it. So Dennis has built this incredible structure now where he's the GM. He's got Zanuck and Morway. O'Connor still present. So you've got that great experience level. And then you have Walt Perrin, who's been around forever and is amazing international and local college or American college guy. You have Dave Fredman, who's been around forever and who's your pro. And then below them, he's got developing stars. Andre Patterson, former Indiana player, works directly with Dave Fredman. Andrew Mealy developing, working with Walt Perrin on college. And then Steve Schwartz has done a lot of tax work and other stuff, who's really bright, young, developing. There's Marquise and there's Dan and there's just a whole collection. And Lindsay empowers these guys to give them great feeling of value and say, and it's just a really fabulous work environment that people want to be a part of. And it's a tribute to what Dennis and the Jazz have built. It's when Quinn talks about built to last. That's a huge part of what we're talking about here with the Utah Jazz. All right, so now let's get to the NBA free agency. We talked about this. I had some scouts that were, or sources that were just 100% on last year that talked about what was going to happen in the marketplace. And we talked about the fact that there was going to be about 40% less money on the marketplace. We talked about possibly about 25 or some things like that. And then finally kind of said, there might be 40%. And really the thought was that there'd be 25% less money on the marketplace unless Kyle Lowry and Drew Holiday switch teams, in which case then you'd be down to about 40% less money. Interestingly, those guys didn't switch teams, and we still dropped about 40%. Last year there was about $5 billion spent, and this year there was about $3 billion spent on players. So a huge, tremendous drop of almost 40% of money, and now it's going to get even tighter. And why is that? Well, the primary thing that's going to happen here is that the cap is going to increase at about 2% for the next year, 2, maybe even 3. And when you start to look at that and you have 2%, and you only have a 2% increase, well, every salary like Gordon Hayward and everybody else has been signed either 5 or 8% increases. So even before you try to add a player, all of the rest of your players on your roster are suddenly increasing 5 to 8% while the cap's holding at 2%. And that is going to lead to an even tighter and stricter market. Tim McMahon wrote a piece on it on ESPN, and he talks about the amount of everybody had in the year which we had the big jump, everybody but 2 teams had cap room. Okay, well now you've got everybody, now you've got half the league is over the luxury tax. So there you have there's the kind of the contrasting difference of where we were. One is just everybody had money to spend, go nuts, and instead now what we have is almost half the league is in the luxury tax. So what does this mean? Next year's 2018 class is incredible. Kevin Pelton wrote a whole piece on it recently about the amount of players that are in it, and there just isn't enough money for the class. I think that's when you start to look at the 2018 class, you have this, LeBron obviously is going to be the primary guy that's talked about here, but there's also Durant is back out there, Joel Embiid, Russell Westbrook, Nikola Jokic, Paul George, DeMarcus Cousins, DeAndre Jordan, Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, who Detroit really has to resign probably at this point, Aaron Gordon, Clint Capella, Yusuf Nurkic, Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker, Robert Covington, Gary Harris, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Danny Green, Trevor Ariza, Carmelo Anthony, LaMarcus Aldridge, Elfrid Payton, Marcus Smart, Brooke Lopez, Greg Monroe, and then he lists Derek Favors as the 28th free agent. Rodney Hood is the 30th, and Dante Exum doesn't make the list. So what does this do to Rodney Hood, Derek Favors, and Dante Exum? What is curious is their representation honest and straightforward with them about the landscape they're coming in? And more importantly than that's not a shot at the agents, are they willing to listen? I can tell you, talking to players in the league last year or overhearing conversations where players, they're not even offering me Evan Turner money. Okay, well, that's a huge problem for agents and players. They're not offering me Bismack Biyombo money because those contracts don't exist. I'm better than Alan Crabb, I heard. Okay, but those numbers don't exist anymore. Those numbers and those contracts aren't available. And so what we have next year is a few teams that have a bunch of cap space. Chicago, the Lakers, Atlanta. And they really may be able to do a quick rebuild, impressively. And then you have these players that are going to cost mammoth amounts of money and likely push their teams into the tax. And then there aren't other teams, players to get signed. So, what happens for Derek Favors, who, depending on his health, obviously if his health isn't right, it's going to be unfortunate. But let's say Favors has a good season, plays 70 games. He's going to be just 26 years old, and he's able to overcome, and he can figure out a position in the league. I mean, that's an incredible talent, and I don't know what's out there for him. Rodney Hood and Dante Exum get really interesting because Rodney Hood, at this point in time, has the exact same numbers as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Rodney Hood's numbers, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope having played one more game, are very similar. Pope, for all the money, and everybody's so excited, the Lakers signed him, and it's like he suddenly became a different player. He shot 40% last year. His effective field goal percentage was 48%, which is below league average. And suddenly the Lakers signed him. It's like a great deal. It's and he got a 1-year deal. That's a 1-year deal. Now, if you're Rodney and the Jazz first of all, if you're the Jazz, you're not going to offer Rodney Hood some huge deal when you really don't know what's coming. By the way, Hood's older than Pope. I mean, so the only thing that's slightly misleading about that is that Hood's a year older than Pope. But just to make sure everybody, in their 3 years, Pope's effective field goal percentage is 48, Hood's is 50. Both of them shoot the exact same amount of free throws a game, which is almost none. Hood is a 3 percentage points better three-point shooter and a 1 percentage better field goal percentage, but we just talked about it. Both of them are very low on assists and steals, and their rebounds are the exact same. And that's if you just take their cumulative numbers. What's actually you can go play with here is that you back out Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's last season in fairness of comparison because of the fact that he's actually a year older. So you take him to 23 and you take Hood, only gets 2 years at 23, and you take out Hood's last year. And it's similar. Rodney actually looks a little bit better because last year brought his career numbers down. But those are similar players. And so that's kind of that in this marketplace, which wasn't great, Rodney Hood or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's market disappeared. He got a 1-year, $18 million deal. So if you're Rodney Hood, what can you fairly expect in this upcoming market? If you're the Jazz, what are you willing to give Rodney Hood before he even goes in the market? I asked few people around the league. One person said back to me, let him go on the, no, hard to tell at this point, but realize that this deal with Rodney and Dante has to be done. It used to be done like before opening day. Now it's done before like October 31st. So it's too early to tell in the season what kind of player he's going to be. So you're basically doing it on no new knowledge than we have right now. One person said to me, I don't offer him anything. I let him go see what he can do. And even if he has a great year, the market's going to be so tight you'll get him for a good deal. I mean, that's brutal. Somebody else said to me he's going to get 4-year $50. Which is probably a pretty good deal for the Jazz, and it's probably about right. I don't know that Rodney Hood takes a $12.5 million deal over 4 years, but I think he probably should. I don't think as a restricted free agent with that many free agents out there and with that amount of or lack of money and lack of space, people are going to get tied up in restricted free agency. I mean, we've seen the restricted free agents just get frozen out of the marketplace this year. So it's a really fascinating number. Somebody else was a little bit higher. If he's your leading scorer, he's going to average 18 points a game, they said, and people fall in love with points, and they put him a little higher. All right. So it's somewhere in that range. If you're the Jazz, do you offer him a 4-year $40? Do you offer him the 4-year $50? I mean, are you trying to get that deal done? We're a little tight on money, but and then he's going to look at it and say, I want Joe Ingles money. I want Evan Turner money. I want Alan Crabb money. And some of that exists and some of it doesn't, and that's where it becomes almost impossible to get these deals done. In the case of Dante, I just don't have any idea. I really just don't have any idea what you could offer or what you could give him and how much you're willing to play expecting him and what you're expecting from him, right? I mean, if you really believe he's still going to turn it on, you could get yourself a heck of a deal because he has almost no market value right now. From what he's done so far, he'll be in the league because he's got too much talent. Trey Burke's like out of the league. He wouldn't be that. Don't misunderstand. But he's got a long way to go before he's getting a payday. And I'll bet his agent, his group probably think he's getting a payday. I'd be stunned if they can find any level of an agreement with Dante because there's just such an unknown about who he is as a player and where he is. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But I'm not sure Dante doesn't get an offer sheet from the Jazz, and I don't think he gets an offer in restricted free agency because there's no number anyone's going to be willing to go to with Dante unless he has this blow-up season. That's something the Jazz wouldn't match, and so then that just chills the marketplace. And so unless everybody comes to that agreement and somehow you can get a deal done where you kind of have a 2-year, 3-year, just decent number deal and everyone's good with it, there's no way to get that done. The one thing on Rodney's pretty comfortable, likes where he is, doesn't love the spotlight. That might allow them to get a deal done with his interest in staying a little bit differently than otherwise. All right, so that's the kind of the breakdown of where we are, what we had for you. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai. Really enjoy getting to know Blake and the guys. Add that to your list of cars if you're looking, and stop by 4646 South State Street and see what they have to offer for you. If you'd like to advertise on Locked On Jazz, email me at dlock09@gmail.com. We'll start a new schedule of advertising with clients. You can be in the summer, but also inventory's filling up for September, October, and the season. If you want to get aboard, you need to do it now. dlock09@gmail.com. Have a great day. This has been Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.